Welcome to the Wealth and Purpose podcast, where people who are led by their hearts come to learn the secrets to creating wealth in a way that feels really good and live their purpose fully in the process. I'm your host, Patty Lennon. I'm an ex-type A corporate banker turned intuitive business coach. I'm also a wife, a mom to 2 preteens, a professor, Girl Scout leader, and well, hey, you get it. Like you, I wear a lot of hats. Whether you're looking for inspiration to get started or strategies to get growing, I am here to help you create abundance in every area of your life and business. Welcome. Hey there, this is Patty here. Welcome to this episode of the Wealth and Purpose podcast. And today I want to talk about the real enemy that we're facing right now on this planet. There's been a lot of discussion, at least where I live in the States, and specifically in the state I live in, Connecticut, about this is the enemy we're fighting, using language in media that infers enemies. And underneath all of that, really that energy is fueled by exactly one enemy, and that enemy is fear. And the way that fear is really showing up in the world right now is in the spirit of otherness. So I've talked a lot about this, and really my goal with this podcast, my intention with this podcast is to create space for you, or maybe someone that you're going to share this podcast with, create space for other people to not be so difficult to be around, and to potentially open up space for you to accept people in your community that maybe have different ideas. And I know at the stage that we're in, at least in the States, that's really hard, because right now there is a dialogue going on that essentially if you are of one side of the political spectrum, and honestly, I can't even call it the political spectrum, because I don't even believe our parties are behaving like themselves anyway, what they stand for. But, there's definitely these extremist views, and you're either part of one extreme or the other. And if you're part of one, you have to see the other one as an enemy, and you cannot even be willing to consider that they could be right? Like that's evil, essentially. And this is really the dialogue that's starting to happen. And that's why I know that the real enemy we're facing right now is fear. And by fear, I mean, fear has many children. It can be anger and hatred and violence, and specifically what I'm talking about, which is otherness. And so otherness is, the experience where you are really committed to seeing yourself as part of a group where there's another group, where you're either part of what you are part of or you're other, right? You're either with me or you're against me. And psychologically, where this comes from, and if you followed this podcast for a while, I've talked a lot about this with, the way our brain developed from the amygdala, from the reptile brain, is it developed with this fear response. And this fear response is really about keeping us safe. And so I'm going to pull all that together. And some of this may be, you may be hearing this for like the millionth time if you've been following me for a while. And you may be hearing it for the first time, which I'm going to go back and go through it slowly. Essentially, a part of our brain, the amygdala, is that part that releases that fight or flight response, fight, flight, or freeze. And that's when you hear people say that we're acting, so our stress responses, sometimes our bodies react as if there's that saber-toothed tiger waiting outside the cave, right? It's like we see everything as this like life or death situation. A lot of times it's actually not the saber-toothed tiger that we're dealing with from an evolutionary standpoint. What we're actually dealing with is the fear that we're going to be thrown out of the tribe. Thousands of years ago, when we existed as tribal people, it was necessary to be included in the tribe. Because if you weren't part of a tribe, you likely couldn't survive, because you wouldn't have embodied all the skills necessary to survive in the world alone. You'd need hunters and gatherers and nurturers and doctors or medicine people, shamans, warriors, all the roles would need to be played, and each person would need to play their role for the entire tribe to survive. And also just that entire group safety idea where, many hands can make light work. And then also with many eyes that you can watch for danger. Things that our ancestors, our many, many generation ago ancestors dealt with are still actually held in our DNA, right? And then our amygdala is still evolving from this idea that we need to be a part of the tribe. It's one of the reasons why public speaking is one of our biggest fears as a people, is not because speaking in front of a group of people is what's hard. It's that we're afraid that what we say or the way we say it may cause us to be rejected. And that then triggers that whole being thrown out of the tribe. Well, if we're afraid of being thrown out of the tribe, then what makes us feel safe is when we're included in the tribe. And when we're in a year like we are in, where so much is going on, definitely a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be informed by living in the States. And I know it looks different in every country, but I can only speak to what I'm living in this country right now. The racial tension, the political tension, and then just the overall tension from being in a pandemic has really, heightened our stressors. And what's happening then is we're feeding a lot into our amygdala's power, meaning when our stress responses are up, our amygdala, there's a lot more blood flowing to the amygdala. And as a result, it's making a lot of the decisions. And so we're looking for easy ways to become safe. And the easy way to become safe, especially when you're fatigued, is to find your tribe. And then once you find your tribe, is knowing what's not your tribe. And that dynamic starts to build a belief that, like, if you're saying something that tells me that the tribe I belong to is not good, then I'm going to be mad at you. You're my enemy because I need this tribe to be safe. I need this tribe to be my home. And you can't say that this is bad because now you're saying my safety is bad. Now that can sometimes feel illogical. And I'm going to speak specifically to, we've got our two presidential candidates. Well, we have our president and he'll be on the ballot, President Trump, and then we have Joe Biden. If I'm for Biden, then critics are going to say, that they're saying he's not mentally stable, that he's older, throwing all these jabs, right? Most of them baseless. But, maybe some of them are based in reality, but throwing them with such venom to make it's bad. And what happens when you do that, when you throw venom at the other, when you create this sense of otherness, and then you start throwing like arrows, right? Really making this disparity between the two sides be something worth fighting over, something worth deteriorating into some verbal war, toxic discussions, you risk fortifying the other side. So if I'm the recipient of those jabs, most likely I'm not going to suddenly go, oh, you're right, let me go to your side. I'm going to strengthen, right? I'm going to strengthen my resolve, and I'm going to pull in closer my tribe. And that's really what's happening. And that otherness creates polarization. It's happening as well with masks, right? Wearing masks. If you don't want people to wear masks, the criticism is that people who are wearing masks are sheeple, right? That they're sheep. And then if you're wearing a mask, really maybe you don't even necessarily believe 100% in wearing a mask, but you're doing it to protect others who you do believe that it's helping them, whether it's helping them mentally or physically or in some other way, psychologically. You are doing it as a good member of society, and someone's attacking you and telling you that you're doing it because you're not thinking, because you're just a follower. Well, then that's going to strengthen your resolve, and you're really going to shut down and hearing what the other side has to say. And so what's happening is on all of these fronts, the jabs that are being thrown from each side are deteriorating the ability for the middle to exist, right? And it's causing this otherness to become more and more extreme and this polarization to become more and more extreme. And the problem is that that polarization isn't real. It's not real. Like extremes, like what we're experiencing in belief systems and what feels so alive, especially in social media and on mass media, that's not the majority of the people, right? There are very few absolutes. And certainly when it comes to a pandemic that no one has a guidebook for, when it comes to the deterioration of political parties, like what we're experiencing, to say either one of them are perfectly good, right? Or absolutely bad, all of it is leaving out all the space in the middle. And the space in the middle is where we come together. The space in the middle is where otherness starts to dissipate. And the reality is we are more than our political beliefs or our opinions about a mask or any number of topics. And we are relational beings. Human beings are relational beings. And our ability to relate to others, to be in community with others, which is different than tribes, right? In community means you live and work within a group of people, but not where you don't have the freedom of your own individual expression and you can't follow your own path, but where you are coming together, understanding that you are not an island, right? And that there is this need to live and work together. And the more we feed this otherness, the more we move further and further and further away from what we want. Because even as we express our views, right, about anything, let's say it's about wearing a mask. Well, let's say you're pro-mask and you want everyone to wear a mask. Well, throwing jibes at people who aren't wearing masks are fortifying their resolve to continue down that path, right? It's only going to be in the middle ground where we're going to find a way to work together and a way for those sides to meet. And the more extreme, the more otherness we create, the harder it is we're going to find that middle ground. And it's really that middle ground where love exists. It's where peace exists. And this translates into the way we treat ourselves. And this is something that, I talk about all the time in Receiving School. And you've probably heard me talk about it here is one of the core issues most people face in having joy, in having happiness, in having peace in themselves is that they reject parts of themselves, that they make parts of themselves other because they were parts of themselves that their family didn't accept, that their friends didn't accept. And so they rejected it because, again, they wanted to stay part of the tribe. But that otherness is what leaves us feeling incomplete. It leaves us unsatisfied. It's when we allow in those parts of ourselves that we really can find our wholeness, that we can find our peace. And I think I just talked about this a couple of weeks ago. One of the most common places that many people reject themselves is the lazy self. Like, I'm not lazy. It's really, being lazy is a horrible thing. And so I reject the part that's lazy. But the problem is if you completely reject that part of you that wants to lay on the couch and wants to do nothing, it's that same part of you that knows how to balance time. It's that same part of you that understands how to both work and rest, to make space for rest, to make space for play. And when you stop rejecting it and you integrate it and allow it to have its say, that's when you start to find full and complete and whole answers for the whole of you. And the same thing goes with our communities. I am a person who is currently wearing a mask, believes this is the right thing to do, and for a few reasons. And my reasons, it doesn't matter. But here's the thing. For the people who don't believe that we should be wearing masks, I have to find a way to hear what it is that they're so concerned about, because there is likely a solution, right? There's likely a solution in the middle ground, but we're staying so far apart that we can't even hear what those solutions might be, those compromises, those middle grounds. We can't find them anymore, and we have to. We have to find those middle grounds because without them, that's where we create warring factions. That's where we create full-on enemies that we fight against. And so I want to talk about a couple of tools that you can use to sort of embrace this effort to reduce this otherness. And, certainly start within yourself. If there's a part of you, there's a part of your instinct or your inclination, and you just constantly reject it, inviting it back in will start to give you that space for wholeness. But then when you look outside yourself, there's one tool that I just wish everyone would employ immediately, and that is do not share information intended to inflame. Right now, in this country, there's these memes going around that have quotes from Biden and from Trump, right? And you can just tell by the way they're designed. They're black, and then they typically have like a white or a red foreshadow. They're very, harsh quotes. And those are political tools. They are meant to increase otherness. They are meant to create and inflame fear, resistance. Please don't share those. Don't share anecdotes, right? Don't share anything that's not actual source information. So for instance, if there is something that President Trump has said that really concerns you, find the source of that and then create your own content to share that and share your commentary. It doesn't mean you have to keep your opinion to yourself. It means come from a place of understanding that if you want to share information and you want other people who don't necessarily believe the same things you do to hear you, throwing memes out there that are meant to inflame is going to do the opposite of that effect, right? The same thing goes for the way we treat ourselves internally. Like when we say, when we do something that we had committed not to doing, you blow off getting work done and you end up going down the rabbit hole of Facebook, let's say, and just beating yourself up over that, right? That's a really typical rejecting of self behavior. Well, don't do that. Actually start to listen to yourself and go, okay, wait a second. So I committed to getting this project done. And instead of getting this project done, I was on Facebook. Let me really figure out why. Let me really figure out why I did that, knowing how important the other thing was to me. So we can do this internally for ourselves to reduce the otherness we have within ourselves. And then we can behave the same way externally. And so when, someone puts something up in social media that's inflaming, reach out to them privately. Don't bash them publicly, but reach out to them privately. Have a conversation. Conversation is one of the best tools we have right now to find the middle ground, because the reality is most of us are more the same than we're different. And finding those common grounds and common ideas really help people come together. The second tool is to listen and hear what another person's saying when they really are making an effort to communicate. When we get into these polarized spaces of otherness, we intentionally shut down the filter, or we put up a filter that just only allows what we already believe to be true to come through. And so if you're frustrated with President Trump, if you're one of the people that are calling him evil, or many, many things being placed upon him, again, I'm not saying that's right or wrong right now, but if that's the case and you've set yourself up for that otherness, you're going to hear and feed and listen to everything from President Trump and his supporters through that filter, and releasing that filter and really listening to what's being said and really thinking it through and coming up with a conclusion that isn't spoon-fed to you, right? The same thing with Biden, is really listening to what he says. Someone commented that he's, in a group I was in, that he's behaving in a way that he appears to be senile. And they made references to vague references. And so I went and I pulled up 3 pieces of content where he was not reading off of a teleprompter, and I could find no basis for what that person said. And I asked them, I said, I went out, I went looking for it. I could not find it. If you could please share that with me. Show me what you're hearing. Show me what you're seeing. I want to understand. I want to understand where you're coming from. But if they can't be responded to with respect, they're not going to be able to be coming into the conversation with respect. Now, I will say the person I talked to has still not responded to me, but that's okay. I did what I could do. And they know now that they need to come to the table, at least in a group that I'm present in, with real content, right? Real data. And that's so much of what's missing right now is, having information. I grew up a very committed conservative, Republican conservative. So I know what that side of the aisle, so to say, looks like, feels like, where the thought process comes from. And so sometimes I can see things in what people are saying where they're not necessarily saying it the way that other people can hear it, but because I've had that perspective, I know what the heart of the issue is. I tell them privately, what you're saying can't be heard right now. And I think this is really where you're coming from. And you're going to have to dig deeper and come up with ideas that change minds if you really want to do anything other than just build this hatred between groups of people. And so that second tool is really listen and hear what the other person is saying. Don't manipulate what they're saying to mean something. Listen to what they're saying, hear what they're really saying, and look for the truth. And you know what? It takes a lot of time and energy. It really does. I get that. And that's part of the problem of where we're at, is that so many of us are exhausted. I'm raising my hand. I am tired. There has been so many small and big battles I've been fighting on so many fronts, and it's fatiguing. And when that fatigue starts to set in, then our ability to do anything of what I'm talking about gets lower and lower and lower. You've probably been listening to this and thinking, God, that feels so heavy. And if you have, then that's really the third tool I want you to embrace. And this is actually the most important one. And that is step away from the conversation and rest. There's probably many, many places around the world where communities are not fatigued the way we are. But I know in the States, and I would say all Western culture, we are deeply, deeply fatigued. And we need to rest. We need to rest. We need to refill. We need to refuel. And it's okay to step away from the conversation if that's where you're at. Because if you're staying in a conversation that's controversial and you're just pouring more and more gasoline onto the fire, you are part of the problem. And I know that's hard to hear, but it's true. It doesn't mean you can't have a position. It doesn't mean you can't feel strongly about something. But if all you're doing is sharing inflammatory information and throwing jabs at people, you are just contributing to the pool of fear that's out there. We are all swimming in this globe, in this community of humanity. And at any moment in time, we're either pouring fear or love into it. And fear creates otherness, and love creates solutions. And depending on what you want, you must choose your words, your thoughts, and your actions accordingly. And I will tell you, this has been very hard for me, probably seeing that if you follow me on social media, I've been generally quiet for the last 2 months. And the reason is that because I've been looking internally and I've been, deciding what is alive for me and where I need to refuel. And I've also been putting most of my energy into private conversation because I really don't think publicly shaming people moves us in a positive direction. And conversations deteriorate very quickly when they're in a public setting. So short of questioning people when I feel that they really are sharing something that's just blatantly inaccurate and asking them for clarification, most of the conversations I've been taking offline. And some people show up in a really open and honest way. And I've learned from those conversations. Other conversations get shut down, and that's, that's okay too. I did my best, and that's all I can do, right? That's all we can do. But I think it's important to remember that there are so many more good people, so many more loving people out there than what we feel right now, because the extreme voices are taking up all the space. And for those of us that want to pour love into this conversation, it's important for us to do it in a way where we can be heard. And that is my hope and my goal for all of us. I know that was a little more preachy than I usually get. And I promise you, I'm trying to live what I just shared with you. There's times where I just want to flip out on someone. I really do. The short-sightedness of it, or the harshness of it, or the cruelty of what's being said. And I know how hard it is to slow down and not react to that, but it's worth it. It's worth it, because for every one conversation that we move in the direction of love, away from fear, away from otherness, to understanding, to love, it has a huge, huge ripple effect, and it's meaningful. And that is the difference we can make right now. Thank you so much for listening. I send you my love, and I send you loads of peace. I wish you rest and joy and understanding and all the things that your heart needs right now. Hey, thanks for listening. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this podcast with them. And if you're feeling really generous, I'd love for you to leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps us reach many more people, and it fills my heart with so much joy when I hear what you had to say about what you heard. I am cheering for your success. Have an amazing day.